Hi again. This is Mutant Mother, Wife and Autistic 2 with part 2 of what is a tracheostomy and how do you live with one. Eventually okay, but at the beginning it was pretty much hell, simply because of how ill Zoe was all the time. So, as I said before, in her first year, I remember her ENT surgeon saying to me, everyone says that the first 2 years of tracheostomy are the worst. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my gosh, I may have killed myself by the end of it. But that was because I was suffering from severe trauma. I was severe PTSD following a very traumatic pregnancy, birth, the fact I'd lost my first baby and that it had taken 5 years to have Zoe, and I'd been in labour for 9 weeks before I actually had Zoe. I was just exhausted and it was all just a bit too much. However, Leslie was right. The first 2 years were the worst. The first year was actually the worst because she was so ill and so fragile, and we didn't have a care package to start off with, so we had nobody to help us. The only people trained was myself and my husband had to go back to work. So, and she was just poorly. She was just poorly all the time. She was, she went into respiratory distress quite a few times, and it was genuinely hell. However, second year, things got a bit better. She was in hospital once every couple of months. It wasn't quite as frequent. She had a little bit more resilience. And then third year, she was a lot better. We only got into hospital about twice. And then fourth year, she got flu and nearly died. But then after that, she was a lot stronger. And we hardly, I mean, I think we went a year without an admission for her chest. She does still go into hospital now, but more because of her neurovascular condition, not because of a tracheostomy. Right. This is what I forgot earlier. This is what's called a thermovent, commonly known as a Swedish nose. Swedish? Have no idea why. It's just always been known as a Swedish nose. This is what babies wear if they are willing. I was very, very lucky. I had a child who's very rigid in what should go around her trachea. So although she hated dressings or refused to wear a dressing around her trachea to keep her neck soft, she was fine with wearing a thermovent. So we put Swedish noses on Zoe every time she doesn't wear her speaking valve, which I will come to in a minute. But Zoe wears her speaking valve from the moment she wakes up to the moment she goes to bed. And she wears a Swedish nose overnight because you can't sleep with a speaking valve on. It would suffocate you. I'll explain why in a minute. Anyway, this is what it is. See? Plastic with little paper coils inside. Now, the thing with these is that if your child wears these all day, every day, they do moisten the air and they do make your secretions a bit moister. So she will often sound like she's got a little something in her trachea, but not all secretions need suctioning. It's only when the child starts to struggle with them that you really need to suction them. So the other reason why we don't suction Zoe that often these days is because she has a rather incredibly strong cough. The child has been coughing every day of her life and she is ripped when it comes to her stomach. So she can cough and she will cough the secretion straight into this. So what happens is you end up getting this a bit full of secretions, which is disgusting. So if you have a weak stomach or you're a bit squeamish and you have a tracheostomy child, you're going to have to get over that really fast. As a result, we have boxes of these. So when this gets full and dirty, we take it off, we give her a new one. Also, there comes a point where these bits get so wet that they can't breathe through them very easily. You just hear them getting a bit more like this, and then you take it off and switch it for a new one because they're easier to breathe when they're new. So that would basically is your trachea tube. That sits on the end like that. See? And then she just carries on wearing that. It sort of looks like a very mini barrel, like a tiny, tiny, tiny St. Bernard's barrel in the mountains, you know, when they used to do the rescue with the brandy. Anyway, I digress. So I said that Zoe wears these to sleep in because they are easy to breathe in. During the day, she wears this. This is what's called a Passimure speech valve. And essentially what it is, if I can just try and get it there, I don't know if you can see, but there's a very, very tiny thin film of plastic there behind that silver, see? And what that does is it basically closes her trachea, it blocks her trachea. Now, Zoe has what's called a leak now. She's grown to the point where her throat has started to open and therefore air is passing around her tracheostomy and going up through her larynx, which means she's got a voice. Zoe didn't start speaking until she was 3. She didn't have a leak until she was 2.5. So she was silent, which means that she didn't start to speak because children desire to speak is triggered by the sound of their own voice, not the voices around them. So when they hear themselves like screech for the first time, it encourages them to start babbling, and then word development starts, and then you start having a child who's speaking. In Zoe's case, she didn't have a leak, therefore she didn't hear herself, which meant that she didn't start speaking until she got her leak, which was at 2.5, 3. But she had the mental capabilities of a child who was 3. So what happened was she tried to skip the babble stage, and as a result, she now has a speech disorder, because the babble stage is very integral to the development of speech. So she's got a speech disorder, which means that she learned to speak in a disordered way. And she still struggles with the enunciation of certain letters and sounds. Anyway, she wears this day in, day out, and she tolerates it really well, and it makes her speech a little clearer so people understand a bit more. They're brilliant. But for the longest time, she didn't tolerate these at all, because they would fly off. They come in purple, and then for some silly reason, they come in clear, which means that when your child is wearing it without the tie and they cough, this thing flies off into a cafe somewhere, and you will never find it because it's clear, so you can't see it very easily. A lot of children, when they first get their tracheostomies, can't cope with these. Speaking valves are something that every parent child works up to, and you have to get them to tolerate it over time. So you start off with 10 minutes, then 20 minutes, and then 30 minutes, then 45, then an hour, and eventually the child will be able to tolerate it all day. But it's not until they have a big enough leak, because this is blocking the trachea until the child breathes in. Because when they breathe in, they suck the little plastic film inwards, which then creates a leak around it. And then when they breathe out, it closes again, which then makes their speech clearer. That's how that works. Now, when a child with a tracheostomy starts to get ill, their secretions start to get thicker, so they're harder to clear. So one of the ways that you can deal with this is that you can give them what's called a nebulizer, which is what this bad boy looks like. What it is essentially, it's a machine that pumps air through a tube. I'm about to show you. Last, I've just realised there's something missing off the top. Oh well, I'll explain it. So I'm getting really organised with this, aren't I? I mean, so far I forgot the thermovent T, and now I've forgotten the top of the nebulizer, but there you go. Right, so nebulizer. What you do is you unscrew this, and you put a few drops of saline. I mean, in Zoe's case, we put 5 mils of saline in this, because that's the only thing that makes a difference. Then you screw the lid back on, and there is something that you put on top of here that basically, again, connects onto the end of a tracheostomy. And then you turn these things on. And what this does is it pushes air through this tube into the compartment that then basically turns the liquid into a mist. The mist goes into the throat, and then the saline basically breaks the secretions down, makes them looser, and that's how the child is more able to cuff them up and then get rid of them. It's also very good if your child has a wheeze or is asthmatic, because, of course, you can put salbutamol in here, because you can get liquid salbutamol and liquid, something, mamine, I can't remember the word of it. It's gone out of my head. Anyway, there are medications you can get in liquid form that they nebulize. There's also an antibiotic for what is called Pseudomonas, which is a really nasty bug. And if your child is colonized with that, and bear in mind, your child does get colonized with things, which is quite disgusting. But basically, they go set a pat shop in your child's lungs, and then it's a case of trying to get the things out. Also, if a child has a problem with oxygen, so when Zoe gets poorly and the bugs are attacking her lungs and her secretions thicken up, what that naturally does is it makes it harder to breathe, harder for her to get oxygen into the system, and then her oxygen saturation levels will tend to come down. A child's oxygen level should always be above 92. When it hits 92 or below, that's when, if your child has got a healthy heart, that is, because cardiac patients tend to be lower. If the sats go below 92, then at that point you might want to put them on some oxygen just to support them. And that is what this is. This is an oxygen tube. And what this does is you hook this one end onto the end of the oxygen canister, and the other end clips around a thermovent T. So basically, it puts the oxygen directly into the tracheostomy and supports the child's breathing. And that, I think, is pretty much all that you really need to know about tracheostomies. They are difficult to live with to begin with. They really are. They're terrifying because, as I found out, when you have a child who's completely and utterly reliant on it, it's really hard to sleep. Because if you don't wake up when they cry, And bearing in mind, they can't cry. They can cry, their face crumples up, they get tears, but they make no sounds at all. You can hear it through their trachea because they get more secretions, but otherwise you don't really hear anything. If they need you and you don't wake up and their trachea comes out, you know, you wake up with your child not being alive. And that was pretty much my overriding, terrifying thought when Zoe first came home, which is why I slowly had what can only be described as a mental breakdown. But luckily for me, Shooting Star Chase, the children's hospice at the time, had us on their books because of her tracheostomy, and they rescued us and they took us in and they campaigned for us and they got us carers and they gave us our lives back, basically. They saved mine for sure. And I think they saved Zoe's as well, because the first weekend she was in, oh good Lord. Rosie, enough, Rosie. Rosie. Oh. I love my dog to bits, but she's a Tibetan Terrier, and Tibetan Terriers are alert dogs. Come here, come and say hi to everybody. Look. Oh, shh. Look over here. What's that? Who's that? Who's that? Oh, she's a little nightmare. Anyway, yeah, I was going to say was that the first weekend she was in Shooting Star, she went into respiratory arrest. Respiratory distress, rather than arrest, is there are clear signs to it. You get what's called a tracheal tug, so they start going, that bit starts tugging in like that. Their ribs start to show when they're breathing in. Their diaphragm starts to suck in really badly, and you can see that your child is clearly struggling. And that pretty much happened the first weekend we were in Shooting Star. And that's when they said, you need carers and you're not leaving here until we get you them. And I said, thank you for saving my life, essentially. I'd owe them everything, and that's why I do loads of publicity for them. Anyway, I digress. I wanted to tell you what a tracheostomy was. That's what a tracheostomy is. So I hope you found that helpful. It's not as terrifying as it looks. It feels terrifying at the beginning. It's really hard to get your head around everything and how to learn to live with one. But Zoe does everything that any other child does, except swimming. She can't go swimming, obviously. But she goes to the beach. She goes to playgrounds. She goes to playgroups. She does have to have a trained adult with her at all times, obviously. But we still try to have as normal a life as possible. She has friends. We go on picnics. We go on holidays. We've been all over the place, and she loves it. And you know, she still has a really full life. A tracheostomy is not something that can stop you from living unless you let it. So I hope you found that interesting, and I will see you soon. Have a great one, people. Bye.